Reviewing the Ghostbusters series. There is only one way to do this.
If there's something strange in your neighborhood.
Hey guys, how is everybody doing? And welcome to my Ghostbusters review series, which is leading up to the new Ghostbusters Frozen Empire movie releasing in theaters this weekend, which is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. So, leading up to that movie, I'm going to be reviewing all four Ghostbusters movies, and then at the final, out of after the weekend after Frozen Empire has released, I will give you my ranking of all five Ghostbusters movies. And this is a franchise I've been very excited to review. This is a franchise I've looked forward to rewatching. I have not watched any of these movies for a while. Aside from the first movie, I've rewatched this movie dozens of times, so this one was just a fun rewatch. The rest of them will be rewatches for first time in a very long time, which I'm very intrigued to see what my thoughts are on that. And sorry if my voice sounds different, or I stopped talking for a bit, or I rub my nose a little bit. It's allergy season. Here where I live, the snow is melting, and pollen is starting to show up, so my nose is a little stuffy. I might be coughing randomly here and there, so please excuse me for that. And I'm gonna try my best not to do any of that, but it might be a little hard because I was kind of down this past weekend because of allergy season, obviously, and I just haven't been feeling the greatest. But I feel good enough to make this review, so nonetheless. And before I even give you my thoughts on Ghostbusters, I'm gonna tell you right now, I have no issues with this movie. I have no mixed aspects. I have no negatives on this movie. I think this is a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm very excited to review this movie. And this Ghostbusters has always been a movie that I grew up with. I was one of those kids that grew up with Ghostbusters, and I've never really met anybody that has not said that they didn't grow up with Ghostbusters. I absolutely adore this franchise. It's this first movie especially. I love this movie to death. And along with like every other person growing up, I grew up watching this movie. I grew up watching this franchise. I absolutely love this movie. So you're gonna get a lot of love from this franchise for me, aside from like maybe two movies. But nonetheless, here are my thoughts on the original 1984 classic Ghostbusters. Starting off with the positives on Ghostbusters, which is a very long list of positives, and that is the comedy of this movie. The entire cast is a great comedic duo. You got the great Bill Murray in here, who is a comedy legend in my mind. A lot of people don't really bring him up when it comes to comedy legends. I absolutely adore him. You got movies like Ghostbusters, Groundhog Day, Garfield.
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
I'm afraid to admit I actually enjoy that movie. And he's been in plenty of other movies. You got Scrooge, obviously, which is a Christmas classic. Bill Murray, he's an absolute legend, and he's a comedy legend. And he apparently improvised like half of his lines, and like some of his lines that he said in this movie were all improvised, and they're hilarious. He's a funny man in this movie. Then you got Dan Aykroyd, who's great in this movie as well. I think he's hilarious. And then you got like the guy from Honey I Shrunk the Kids, like the dad of that movie, who's the next door neighbor to Sigourney Weaver's character, and he is hilarious in this movie. He's like that goofy type of character to where he's like a nervous, goofy-ish character that I really love. I've always loved him. A lot. I've actually seen some people say that he's really annoying and he's dumb, but I love him for that. He's such an entertaining character every time I rewatch this movie. He's one of my favorite parts about this movie, and he's so funny in this movie. Every time he's on screen, I just couldn't help but laugh because he's a goddamn comedic legend in this movie. And then you got like people like Harold Ramis, rest in peace. Harold Ramis? Is it Harold Ramis? Harold Ramis. I botched the last name, but anyways, Harold Ramis, rest in peace. He's great in this movie. He's also one of the writers, so some of his comedy is going to be good as well. Yeah, the comedy in this movie through and through is just hilarious, and this was like early '80s type comedy to where this was like mostly like SNL people who were like the top of their career when it came to the comedy. And it's no surprise, especially for the time when this movie came out, that it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm not surprised by that. Comedy in this movie, it still holds up. You could tell there's like excuse me. There's like stuff there mostly for like kids, kinda, but at the same time, there's enough there for the adults, which I absolutely love. Along with that, the cast in this movie is perfect. And the cast that we got in this movie was a cast we weren't always going to get because, like, for Bill Murray's character, people like Michael Keaton and Chevy Chase, they were offered the role for the character, but they both turned it down. And Eddie Murphy was supposed to take on not Harold Ramis. What's the one guy's name? He was oh God, he's like the black character in this movie. God, what's his name? Not Vincent. I don't know. I forget his name. The guy who played him in this movie was supposed to be Eddie Murphy, but he turned it down to go over to play in Beverly Hills Cop, which became probably his most popular franchise ever made, and probably his most popular movie, which I think he made the right decision there. And it's weird to think that this is the cast that we would have never gotten. This is like the cast that was never in front of the line of being the main cast of Ghostbusters. And I'm going to tell you now, it's kind of hard to see that because this cast is so perfect and so fun that it's really hard to see anybody else step in the shoes of these characters. Like Sigourney Weaver, I don't even think she was in the front row to play this character. I think it was like offered to other people, and she even gave out ideas to what her character should be and what her character should go through. And she did a great job. Like she literally showed the director and Dan Aykroyd, Ivan Reitman and Dan Aykroyd, like the possession scene and kind of show what she wanted it to look like. She came up with that herself. Sigourney Weaver again wasn't the first person in front of the line to play this character, but she got the role. And again, it's so hard to see all of these characters played by brilliant actors, and you also have to remind yourself these are people that weren't meant to play these characters in the first place. They weren't in front row to play them characters. And it's hard to see anybody else playing. I'm sure you could see other people playing it, but it's hard to see that these people weren't the first choices, and they're great in this movie, especially Bill Murray, who I argue is the face of the Ghostbusters. He's the face of these crew, because every time I think of Ghostbusters, I immediately think of Bill Murray. If I were to think of Ghostbusters and like Michael Keaton or Chevy Chase popped up in my mind, it would be hard for me. And I want to see, and I would love to live in a world to where that did happen because I would want to see what that version would have looked like. But nonetheless, I love the cast that we got. They're great. They're funny as hell. They have great chemistry. I love every single one of these cast members, and it's just hard to see other people playing them. Thing about this movie that every time I rewatch it, I just love it more because of it, and that's just how well the effects age. Sure, some people may watch this movie and say that's dated and the effects don't age well, especially for a movie that came out in 1984. But for me, it's not that because every time I rewatch this movie, the effects they are great. Like some, you could tell there's like some kind of CGI ish kind of effects in this movie, VFX kind of shit going on in this movie, but it happens like so quick that you'd barely even notice it. Like they'll show it, but they only show it when they need to, and every time you see it, it's like a clip glimpse and it's just gone. Like you barely ever saw it. It's like a blink and you miss it type of effects. Like you could look
Disgusting blob.
Slimer, like he looks perfect in this movie. I would honestly say that he still looks great because again, I just think he looks great in this movie. Like every time I see him, like Slimer still looks good. Sure, you got other movies like the 2016 version. You got Frozen Empire coming out here soon, which Slimer's supposed to be in, and you see what those Slimers look like, and sure, they look better than this. But for this time, it looks great and it still holds up. Every time I rewatch Ghostbusters, I never say there's a dip in quality or you go, oh yeah, you can tell those are effects from the 80s or you can fix those today's day and age, which you could. But at the same time, it's like, you don't really need to fix anything with the effects. It ages perfectly. It doesn't look like a downgrade in quality today, especially a movie from the 80s. And I can't say that for many movies where I say the effects age poorly because a lot of movies nowadays really focus on like CGI and a lot of digital effects. But this movie they did not fully rely on it. They only relied on it when they had to. Excuse me. Need water. God, excuse me. But they only relied on the digital effects when they had to. They didn't need to do it. If anything, they could have used digital effects throughout this entire movie, but they only used it in certain scenes, and it's just not noticeable. That is why I love Ghostbusters. Of course, when you're talking about Ghostbusters, you can't forget that amazing theme song.
Strange in your neighborhood. Who you gonna call?
It's perfect. Like, apparently Ray Parker Jr. was that the guy? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the guy who performed it. I could be mistaken. Don't quote me on it. He was actually sued by the people that were originally going to do it, but turned it down because they thought he was like kind of spiffing their song kind of ish. That's what they thought, and he got sued for it. But apparently they lost because the song is still around, and it's like one of the most popular songs ever. This theme, like every time people think of like good like movie music, I bet this would be on the top of their list. It would be in my top three, maybe my even my number one. I love this song so much. It's so classic, and every Halloween I love listening to it because like if you go on like radios, you'll hear this song playing during the Halloween season because it's such a good song and it's so catchy and it's just great. Like I love this song and it kind of puts me in a good mood for some reason. Every time I hear it, I just can't help but dance. This is like a song I would dance to at like a nightclub, kinda. This song in this movie is iconic and it's great, and it just fits this movie. Sure, it's titled Ghostbusters, and I don't, if your song is titled Ghostbusters and then it match your movie, that'd be weird. Something that I love about this movie that some of the other Ghostbusters movies just haven't done yet, and I'm hoping they'll do it one day, but at the same time, I understand why these other movies haven't done it, and is that this movie does have a lot of adult humor. Again, this movie came out in the 80s, and this mostly starred, like, SNL people that were like on SNL and like hot off their career because of that. I think that's why there's like a lot of adult humor in this movie. And for me personally, it works. Yeah, sure, you might watch it today and people will be like, this is not appropriate for kids, but there's enough kid elements in this movie to where it's good for them. But it's something that like movies today are kind of afraid to do. They're afraid to make it kid friendly, but also, excuse me, I had to burp. Uh, but also do stuff for the adults, and there's a lot of adult humor, like the one scene where Dan Aykroyd's character has a special dream. I'll never forget that part about the movie. But the adult humor in this movie is good, like to where I think some kids could also understand it, but at the same time, it's like it's there's not enough in it to make like parents freak out about it. God, I'm gonna fix my hair. I don't like what my hair looked like there. The adult humor in this movie is just good. There's not a lot in there, but some of the stuff that they do have in here, I thought was great. And also, something about Ghostbusters and like the concept of this movie is so simple that it just turned out great. And the movie that we got of this wasn't the original idea, apparently. Apparently, Dan Aykroyd's original script for this movie had Ghostbusters set in like the near future to where Ghostbusters were like a thing to where you capture ghosts, like ghosts were like a thing in the future, so they would go and capture them. And they had like wands or whatever. I like to picture they would probably be like Harry Potter wands, and then they would capture the ghost. And then at the end of that movie, Ghostbuster stations were set out all over the world, and they were treated like police stations and fire stations and stuff like that. The reason that version of the movie wasn't made because apparently, according to director Ivan Reitman, that would have cost $300 million to make, which is insane. And so Harold Ramis came in, fixed the script a tiny bit to set it in present day, make it more simpler, and have it made on a lower budget of $31 million, which I am interested to see what the Dan Aykroyd full version would have looked like where it was set in the near future, but at the same time, I feel that wouldn't make sense because I wouldn't like it if this movie was set in the near future. But what I love about this concept of where it's just a group of friends who are scientists at this college or school, I believe it was a college, and then they all get together, they get a bunch of money to start a ghost hunting type of business to where they all believe in ghosts, they know ghosts are real, they've been hunting them down, but they can never capture them because they never have the equipment. So they get money, they buy a whole fire station, they get a card, they build the machines to capture ghosts, and slowly they become popular and gain money and gain uh, fame, and then they're just a regular thing going on now. I love the concept of Ghostbusters, where they're just regular, normal guys that work out of college that are scientists, and they come up with this idea to capture ghosts for a living. Honestly, if that was my job to just capture ghosts for a living, I'd be down with that. Like that would be fun, right? But anyways, the concept of Ghostbusters is also just so simple. Like it's so simple. I think the reason it became so popular. That is one of the reasons I think this movie is so popular and so praised by so many people. That is why I believe this movie is one of the reasons this movie is so popular. It's just a simple concept. A few scientists that are friends just come up with this Ghostbuster in progress. It's simple and to the point and a lot of fun. My favorite things about this movie and how it's also again so simple is the Ghostbusters design. Like you got this great symbol here that they have all over with just the ghost with like a mark on them and all that. I wanted to call it a stopping sign for some reason. And then you got like their car that's just white and has like a weird siren. It has their symbol on it. I found it interesting that apparently the siren that they made for this movie, I believe the editor of the movie, I could be mistaken, apparently took like the snarl or like a growl of like a jaguar and edited it a lot and edited that very like a lot. And that made the siren for the Ghostbusters siren, which is weird. I didn't think about that. And also their outfits is just a jumpsuit with their name on it with the Ghostbuster symbol on the side. Like it's like stuff like that. It's like, oh, I could make that. Like you could make that. That's how simple it is. Like maybe not the car, but like the outfits and not the proton packs, obviously, because I'm not a genius. You think I got millions of dollars and a fucking degree to build shit like that? Fuck no. I could, but I don't want to. I don't want to be that smart. But anyways, that their designs is just so simple. Like ghost busting, you get rid of ghosts. Put a ghost that everybody knows what a ghost looks like. That's what's commercialized, and then you just have like a little mark around it. Simple design. One of the things that I like about this movie is like how so many people say that this movie is a horror movie. A lot of people say this could be like a gateway movie to horror movies, which I could see that, but at the same time I would really argue with it. But I do like how this movie does like have like a lot of horror elements, like mainly with like the dogs like they're like called a certain dog, and they're like the dogs of this movie. You got a few ghosts like in here, like the Liberian ghost in the beginning of the movie. She's pretty scary looking. You got those dogs. You got Slimer, and like people just busting ghosts. What? Like there are a lot of elements in this movie that are very horror movie. Like every time you watch, you're just like this has like a lot of horror movie elements. Like I could understand why some people would say this is like a gateway horror movie for kids, which it kind of was for me. I always thought this was a horror movie for a while, but at the same time, as I was growing, I was like, this isn't a horror movie. This is a comedy, which I will fully admit that I believe that this is a comedy more than a horror movie. But again, this movie does have like a lot of horror elements in here. For someone who's a big horror fan, I notice it every time I rewatch it that there's enough scary things in here for me. For someone who's a huge Ghostbusters fan, I love it. There's like a lot of horror elements in here to where you could get like the mature kids to watch this movie and that's what I like about this movie, to where they have like the kid, like it's kind of more like kids horror in a way. Like I said, it's a gateway horror movie for kids, and this movie is like a very kids horror, but also a very family friendly movie. This is not really more like a positive, but this is something I really wanted to talk about, and that's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I love the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. He's on my pants here. Where is he? There's one. There's one. And like he's so iconic. I remember when I was younger, I always thought Stay Puft Marshmallow Man design and like the product. I thought that was a real marshmallow thing, and so when I was younger, I would go on Amazon, I'd go on the internet, try to look for them, buy them. And I remember to this day, when I was 6 years old, my papa he bought a whole thing of marshmallows. We put on Ghostbusters, and we took marshmallows, we melted them slightly, and made the Marshmallow Man out of marshmallows. It wasn't big. It was like this big. It was like the size of like my hand, kind of. They don't look identical to it. It looked really messy, but it was fun. And that's like a little memory I wanted to share of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And that thing is so cool too. Apparently, like that suit alone cost like them $20,000, something like that. And I guarantee you, Every Halloween, you're gonna see someone dressed up as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man for good reasons too, because that guy's iconic. And it's not really a positive. I just wanted to share that memory because Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, he's iconic. I wanted to share that memory. All in all, guys, Ghostbusters. It's a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of those movies that I adore. It's one of my favorite movies from my childhood. I've never met a single person in my lifetime that has never said, I love Ghostbusters. I've never even met one person that said, I like Ghostbusters. They say they love Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters, it's a great movie. If you have not seen it, get out of the rock that you are under and buy this movie because it's an absolute classic for a reason, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time. You guys think about Ghostbusters? Have you seen it? If not, get out of the rock you're living under and check it out. And if you like this video, like it. If you love to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for my latest videos. And until my next video, I'll see you all next time.